Hi, hello, welcome. I'm Bloom. Thanks for being here. Today's video is going to be a little bit of a long one because I have a lot to show. I'm going to be working on quite a big and ambitious project for my portfolio, and I thought I would take you through the entire process, so it's going to be a bit lengthy, but hopefully also interesting or helpful. My project is going to be inspired by the challenge called Funguary, which is hosted by Fifal over on Instagram. If you don't know what Funguary is, it's an art challenge where you get inspired by mushrooms and to create art based on those mushrooms. Fifal has hosted this for several years. I've joined it 2 other times, so this will be my 3rd time joining. The first time I joined, I created a set of fashion illustrations inspired by the mushrooms. This was really fun to work on, and I also joined last year, and these are the pieces that I made last year. I tried to capture a scene with the mushrooms and tried to tell a story, and these ended up being my favorite pieces from last year. So I knew I had to join again this year, so hopefully these will also be some of my favorite pieces that I make this year. No pressure. And either way, I also want to expand my portfolio, so this was a good opportunity to do both at the same time. My idea is to create a series of children's book / storybook inspired art pieces because that's what I'm exploring right now with my art. If any of that sounds interesting to you, then stick around and I hope you enjoy it. So my first step was to create a Milanote board. I really like Milanote. I think it's super helpful to keep everything in one place. So I got the prompt list and I found all pictures of the mushrooms that were on the list so that I could have an overview and see which mushrooms I was actually interested in using and what they look like. And then I also linked a separate board which basically just had a bunch of beautiful art pieces that I thought might inspire me in this project. Once I had all of this, I felt like I was ready to move to the next step, which would be brainstorming and trying to picture what my pieces might be looking like. Okay, so I did all of my research. Basically, I went through each mushroom and talked about like what stood out to me about that mushroom and if any ideas came up with it. Excuse me. There were a couple mushrooms where I could sort of clearly see a story, I guess, or a scene from a story. I decided I want to have one character who sort of becomes the protagonist of the story, and each art piece is another step of the story, basically. So with that idea in mind, I chose the mushrooms that I thought made the most sense and I had the best ideas for. I'm not going to do all the mushrooms because I'm not crazy, but basically I have several mushrooms per week that I'm planning to use. So then I finalized some of the idea sketches, developed some of the idea sketches, I guess I should say. So for week 1, I have these 3 mushrooms. The main character is going to be my little mouse, and I'm trying to think of like different ways that he can interact with the mushroom in each step. And then I did that for each of the weeks and each of the mushrooms. So we're looking at 12 pieces, which is going to be a lot of work, I think. But a lot of them are also kind of like spot illustration pieces instead of like full illustration pieces, so it's going to be a good mix. But yeah, that's where I'm at for now. The next steps is going to be finalizing what my character will look like, and then I have to decide what media I'm going to use. For the first steps of the process, I like to be in my sketchbook just to get things down, be really messy. But once I'm starting to try to finalize things, I move to my iPad just because it's a lot easier to make the ears a little bit smaller or make the mushroom at the front bigger. It just allows for a lot more flexibility in making small edits to the sketch. This is all the time that I really had to focus on the proportions of the mouse and making sure that the position that he's in makes sense and looks natural. And also that each mouse on each piece looks like it's the same mouse. which sounds like it should be easy, but sometimes a face shape or an eye in a like slightly higher position can make it look like a completely different mouse. And I don't have a lot of experience with character design, so this is definitely something I struggle with. So I need to make sure that all these little aspects flow seamlessly throughout the pieces so that it's recognized as the same mouse every time. Now that all my sketches are ready, it's time to start working on the first piece. Another benefit of working on my iPad for the final sketches means that I can trace directly from my iPad as if it was a light box so that I can get the sketch onto my paper. I wasn't sure what medium I was going to use. I thought for a while maybe digital because it's my best medium. I use it a lot and I'm very familiar with it. But I decided to challenge myself, of course, because making 12 pieces isn't challenging enough. But I've been getting back into traditional art last year and I'm really enjoying it and I want to get better at it. And the only way to get better at it is by doing it. So even though I think I could get better results if I did this digitally, then I will never find the chance to improve traditionally. So I decided to do it traditionally. I'm using basically whatever I have in the house because I don't want to buy new stuff. So I'm using up the last of my Holbein Acryla-Gouache. A lot of the tubes are already empty, to be honest. And then I'm combining it with just normal gouache from Talens. I'm following a similar technique that I did in last year's February, which I showed the pieces from earlier, where I basically jot down a lot of color at the start and then build up layers on top to start to like chip out the details. I really like how this turned out last year because that means that some parts you can also just leave kind of raw and brush strokey and not really focus on getting the details, and then other parts you can go further in and make things more clear or add more details, like I'm doing with the mushrooms here. I'm using both Polychromos and Prismacolor color pencils. I'm working a little bit ahead of time because I don't want to give myself all the stress of doing everything in February, especially because I'm also working on 2 other client projects at the moment and there's a lot going on, so I would like to be prepared. But while I'm working on this first piece, it's around the end of January, so I'm trying to just be a couple pieces ahead, and then if I can't get a piece done in time, then at least I have a little bit of leeway and extra time to get it done. But these deadlines are sort of made up by me, so I can also just post things later, but I would like every piece to be done within February. The pieces I'm going to be working on are a mix between like full illustrations like this piece and more like spot illustrations, which is like more focus on a smaller section of the scene with just the mouse and the mushroom and not really focusing on creating a background. For this piece, I wanted it to feel like this was the start of his journey and like he just begun and he's headed out. And the mushroom that was inspired by has these very beautiful spots, which reminded me of stars. So this idea of a starry night was the first thing I came up with, and I really liked it, so I decided to stick with it. For the last step of this piece, I go back in with the acrylic gouache once more to try and the final details, which is all these little shooting stars. I was really unsure how this piece was going to turn out. I told myself that if it didn't work out, that it would just be my test piece and I could always make it again. But in the end, I'm really happy with it. I think it went exactly as I hoped, which is great when you can create the art that you see in your head and your hand is able to do that. That's a great feeling. I think he's really cute and I'm excited to see how he goes on his adventure. I think this is a fun first piece. I very recently decided that I want to buy a scanner because I hate print stores. I have a horrible time anytime I go to a print store. So I generally just avoid going to the print store at all costs. And I realized I have free will and not a lot of money, but some money. And this is an important purchase. So I decided to buy a scanner and I'm very, very happy about it. It also happened to arrive just in time for February, which was perfect. So either way, I decided I was going to scan my pieces because I think they're just much nicer to post that way, and also if I want to use them on my website. But I decided I might as well do some tweaking digitally as well. Firstly, because the scan doesn't capture the colors perfectly, but then also because I wanted to change some of the colors slightly, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to do so. Also because I want this series to be part of my portfolio, I kind of want the pieces to be as good as they can get. I do really like the piece as it is, but I can see things that went wrong or things that could be improved, so I decided to just go for those to make sure that I feel good including it in my portfolio. Sort of how I would treat client work as well, that I don't want to leave it as good enough, but I want to try and get it to its best version. I first put it into Photoshop and I changed some of the colors and the brightness, and then I brought it to my iPad so that I could refine some of the details. For this piece specifically, I wanted to make sure that the details on the mouse were more refined and more accurate. You can only be so accurate with a pencil on paper, so I saw a lot of mistakes that I made. So basically, what I want the focal point of the piece to be, I decided to refine that more digitally so that it would stand out a bit more compared to the rest of the scene. So this is how the piece turned out after my little edits. I didn't do a lot, as I said. I wanted to keep a lot of the piece as is because I really love how it looks, but it just feels like a little bit more of a refined version of before. This is the inspiration for my second February piece. I was really inspired by the shape and the texture of this mushroom. I immediately thought of a labyrinth and zooming in on it very closely and having my character sort of trapped in it. I chose a mouse specifically because I wanted to play with my character's size and them being perceived as very, very small. This was one of the first mushrooms that I saw that I immediately had an idea of how I could picture a story with it, and also sort of decided the theme amongst all the other mushrooms. Originally in my sketch, I didn't have the ants, and I felt it was a little bit empty and it needed something to guide the eye a little bit more and add a little bit more interest to the scene. So I'm really happy I added the ants because it makes a perfect little trail for the eyes to go. And it also adds a layer to the story element because of the little ant who's giving directions to the mouse who's lost. Again, the color scheme was inspired by the mushroom. Usually when I depict nature or earth or dirt, I use a very warm brown, but in this case I decided to use a cooler brown and mix it with a blue. And these blue tones, I feel like, give it a bit more of an air of confusion and like he's in a undesirable place because it's not giving warmth, but it's giving a bit of an eerie vibe, I guess. That's what I was going for. This piece was really nice to work on. I really enjoyed the process. I think there's a big difference between working digitally and working traditionally, and I don't know, it just made me really happy to work on paper, and I'm happy that I chose to do these pieces traditionally. Also, with the rise of AI art, it also feels nice to work traditionally and work with my hands and move it back a little bit from digital, with art being stolen and art being recreated. For me, that was a bit demotivating when working on my digital art, and I've recently just been feeling a lot better working traditionally. Something that I struggled a little bit with this piece was trying to create depth and making sure that it looked like the mouse was inside the labyrinth, and I think that the ants that I added really helped with this because it sort of showed that there is a layer in the background and a layer in the foreground. I also feel a little bit less stressed working on the traditional pieces, knowing that if I do make a mistake, that I can always go in afterwards and edit it once I've scanned it. So this marks the ending of piece 2 out of 12. I'm feeling surprisingly optimistic because these two pieces have gone really well, but also a little bit worried about still having to have 10 pieces to finish. Again, for this piece, I didn't edit that much. I changed the colors slightly, and I wanted to focus on making the line work look as good as it could be, especially on the mouse again, and I edited the ant a little bit because I didn't like how I chose to do his position in the traditional piece. But besides that, I kept most of the rest the same, and this is how it turned out. This piece was very interesting to work on. The inspiration was Devil's Cigar, so I knew I wanted to do something kind of ominous, a bit spooky, and I decided to go with this really deep red as an underpainting. I haven't really used this technique up until now, so I was excited to see and experiment. I also didn't really have a plan. I was a bit winging it, but hoping for the best. The good thing about underpaintings is that when you put layers of paint on top, they have more of a cohesiveness to them because they share the similar color underneath. Because I'm using these paints in quite a watercolory way, that color still shows up quite a lot. And all the colors that I ended up with are super, super beautiful and unexpected, but I'm very happy with them. I definitely feel like the piece is unfinished in a way, and it feels like it's just the base layer, and I didn't really go over with a lot of color pencils on top, but I'm not really sure where I want to go with it next, so I decided for this piece I'm going to do the next stage digitally and maybe play around a little bit more, and then I can also undo in case I accidentally ruin it, but I didn't want to ruin it on paper, so I'm leaving it like this for now, and I'm really excited to see where he's going to go. So we made it to piece 6 out of 12. At this point, I am very tired and a little bit running out of steam on this project. So I decided that I'm going to cut it down to 10 pieces because there are 2 sketches that I didn't really feel very confident about from the beginning, and I would like to give myself some grace because I'm tired, and I don't think that there's a point to push myself to make more pieces and make more pieces of lesser quality rather than just focus on the pieces I have left and trying to get them to a place that I'm happy with. So at this point I was tired and trying to renew my excitement for this project, and this piece actually managed to do that a bit because I had a great time throwing down all these colors and just being really messy with it. I knew I wanted to create a sort of tree bark with some moss and some tree textures and just a bunch of color. And then afterwards add the mushroom on top, which sort of lives on the tree bark. My idea for this piece was to have a sort of staircase of mushrooms that my character is climbing up on, well, struggling to climb up on because he's just a little guy. I'm really happy with how this one went. I think the textures and the colors and everything is just really beautiful. I also decided to give myself more grace, and I decided that I will add the mouse completely digitally on this one, just because I really like how the background is and I don't want to ruin it, and also just to make the process a little bit easier on myself and hopefully helps me to continue and finish the rest of these pieces. So I scanned the background and I imported it into Procreate on my iPad. I really love to see scanned traditional work. I love looking at all the juicy textures. This is scanned at 600 dpi, so you can see all of the pretty brush strokes and splatters. I copied the mouse from my sketch layer and imported him onto this background to see how he would fit in the scene. And then I got started to adding him in. I chose a brush that I've been using since the start, which is a soft waxy brush, which is meant to look like pencil/color pencil, and this way I think it still sort of blends into the scene. I also made sure to only use colors from the piece itself because that's also how I was doing it traditionally, and I tried to keep it a bit more messy and layering different colors together, basically trying to emulate a bit more of a traditional style still without making it too perfect and too digital looking. And I really like how this piece turned out. I really like the combination of the digital and the traditional actually. I think making the background in traditional art lets me keep all the beautiful, juicy textures and colors that I really love. And then making the focal point in digital allows me to be more accurate, and it also makes it stand out more from the background. I didn't think when I started this project that I would really enjoy the look of traditional and digital mixed together, but I actually really like how this piece turned out. And I think this is definitely going to be my style moving forward with children's illustration. I almost didn't start this project because I felt like my skill set was not really at the level to create such a big project like this. But your skills are always improving, and if you're passionate about the project right now, there's no guarantee that you're going to be passionate about it when you finally decide that you're maybe good enough to do it. So this was a really good lesson for myself because I was able to see that I am actually able to make art like this and be happy with the results, even though I don't have a lot of experience with it. So if you have a project that you're putting on the side until you're quote unquote good enough, I think you should just start it today because you never know what outcome you're going to get. So this is piece 8 of the series so far, and I decided for myself that this is going to be the last piece. Initially it was going to be 12 and then it was going to be 10, but now I've decided it's going to be 8. I'm really happy with the pieces I made so far, but I can feel myself getting less and less patient and less motivated as each piece goes, and I think the result also unfortunately shows that. I really wanted to finish this one at least because I did like this concept a lot of the mouse flying to safety with the help of the mushroom umbrella. I did a lot of editing for this one digitally because I just really wasn't satisfied with the traditional result that I got. I think mainly the colors and also the brush strokes of the background, and then also the size and shape of the mushroom I didn't like anymore. So I did a lot of digital edits, but I ended up with a place that I think it's really cute, and I'm happy that I took the time to make the edits. Overall, I'm really happy with the pieces I managed to make. I had a really fun time in general, and I don't want to ruin my experience, so I'm stopping while it's still fun. And I think I have a lot of pieces that I'm really happy to include in my portfolio. And either way, this project already helped me learn a lot more about my style when it comes to children's illustration and also developing my techniques. And here is an overview of all the pieces that I made. I'm really happy with a lot of the results. I do think I have a lot of areas to learn, but that's okay. I'm not sure if it looks like the same mouse in every single piece, unfortunately, even though I tried very hard. Also, for a lot of the pieces, I went for my first and initial idea, also just because I wanted to get the pieces done faster and I was working on a bit of a timeline. I think if I had more time, I would have tried to brainstorm a bit further and seen if I could come up with a bit more, because the first idea you come up with is not going to be the best one. but I was trying to get this project finished alongside other client projects. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thanks for making it to the end, for those of you who did. I hope you found it interesting, and if you haven't already, consider liking and subscribing, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!